Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. It's Friday. Happy Friday, everyone. Who has to go back to the extreme cold? Yeah. So we've been taking in this weather, haven't we? Well, thank you for coming. My name is Michelle Ferrez.
And my name is Devon. Just a quick note to say that this mic is for recording purposes, and if it's not amplifying our voices, it's because it doesn't. It's not intended to. So sometimes there's the illusion that a mic means you should hear us better. We will try to speak up, but this is so we are properly recorded. I work at the School of Information at the University of Michigan.
So our talk is on utilizing students' funds of knowledge to remove barriers and promote transfer readiness and success. But first, it's important to really address and give you sort of the University of Michigan context, where it's been, where it's at, etc. So the first start, what I want to explain is we have some learning objectives for the following workshop. One is learn how to view community college administrators and students as co-creators in program development at research institutions. Two, understand ways to identify and consult with institutional agents and leverage resources across units, departments, and across colleges. Third, expand the traditional constructions of how we define merit. And lastly, define and provide examples of how to incorporate transfer students' funds of knowledge in the curricular and co-curricular context. And we'll explain what these terms are and engage you in actual activity on this. So first of all, the University of Michigan terrain. Prior to 2015, there was sort of a renewed commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. University of Michigan has been a leader in this area for quite some time. If you're around in 2003 and followed the Supreme Court case whereby University of Michigan fought that case and won, we're extremely committed to this, and that takes higher level leadership, a supportive president, all the way down and filtering down into the departments and units, etc. So in 2015, there was a renewed commitment to DEI initiatives. And so it spent a whole year of gathering administrators from across campus, all 19 colleges, units and departments, of really strategically thinking what that means, and also thinking how it filters into every type of work that we do wherever we are positioned at the university. And there was also a huge issue in terms of holding us accountable and how will we be accountable to these initiatives. So in 2016, there was a creation of a 5-year DEI strategic plan, the appointment of a vice chancellor of DEI, and the development of a centralized DEI office in support of this mission. So I provided you the website. I don't want to go into sort of the overview of this, but the point is that everything is transparent in terms of where we're at in meeting that strategic goal, what the units are doing, etc., and laying it out for the community. But one area that stood out in DEI initiatives was recruiting, retaining, supporting transfer students. And so these were the 4 objectives in broad scope in terms of that and part of the DEI initiatives. Implementing specific strategies for recruitment and retention, support of diverse population of transfer students, launch college-wide department-based discussions with the goal of creating departmental transfer-friendly cultures, and making transfer students more visible as part of their undergraduate populations. Third, continued targeted commitment to recruiting community college students, and make commitment to work with tribal colleges to recruit and retain Native American students in particular. If you're not familiar with the state of Michigan, Michigan has a number of tribal colleges, such as Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College. And so we recognize that we have not had good and or strong relationships with some of our community colleges, including tribal colleges in the state of Michigan, and really making that intentional. Fourth, increasing the size of the current transfer student population in LS&A to approximately 1,200 to 1,300 students per year, and increase the attention to diversifying the transfer applicant pool. I want to say that we brought some data, but the point of this presentation is not to go over data, but if you have some data questions, feel free to come up after this presentation and we can give you those numbers. So I'm the director of the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program, UROP, also known as UROP. UROP has been around for 30 years. Woohoo! Established in 1988-89. Some of you in this room may not have been born then. But we're celebrating 30 years, and we've been a national model in terms of engaging students, all students, because of our unique model. The key word is opportunity. We open it up to first and second year students and transfer students. There's not a GPA requirement. We don't ask for that. Its key is providing any student who wants to work in research in any field. We have over 1,100 research projects in all academic disciplines, professional schools, units, and majors, from engineering to the medical school to dental to the humanities to social science to business, etc. So in all fields. And when I say we started as a national model, till this day we still are a national model in terms of broadening participation for students and being inclusive. We were also the first ones to do a longitudinal study on the impact of students over time that was funded by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Education. And it's still the #1 cited in literature and higher education literature. We've worked across campuses, across the nation, including community colleges, to build something similar at those colleges. And by the way, if you're not familiar, there is a community college undergraduate research forum that's part of the larger undergraduate research council. So community colleges are starting to develop their own programs at their home institutions. So how this relates. So as you saw on the previous slide, we have over 1,400 students in our program now, in all majors, all disciplines. And back right here in 2007, 2 years before in 2005, we started looking at our data, and we started seeing the volume of community college students that we were serving at University of Michigan. And I'm going to be honest here, at the time, University of Michigan wasn't really paying attention collectively at that population. UROP was, because we were always inclusive, we were always looking at making sure. We also had a record number of students participating in our program who were from community colleges. So we looked at our data and realized, we need to do two things. One, we need to set our curriculum where we create seminars in particular for community colleges' needs, because we're so used to serving freshmen and sophomores. And as you know, community college students have very different needs in transition. So we need to be honest with ourselves and actually look at our curriculum and change our curriculum. Second, we also needed funding to support more students. So we applied for a Jack Kent Cooke grant, received it. 2007, then that's when the institution, based on our data, which I'll talk about later, that is when they matched it and said, we want you to build this, create it, and really leverage it. So in 2007 is when it really became a Michigan Community UROP's Michigan Community College Summer Research Fellowship. In 2010, we launched our Changing Gears. Changing Gears is during the academic year for U of M transfer admitted students, versus the community college is statewide from students, and they didn't have to be admitted to U of M yet. And then in 2014, we received a donor, and the donor was one of the participants in our program many years ago, who was a community college student himself, who transferred to U of M, married his wife, who was also a transfer student, and they believed in what we were doing, saw the impact, and gave. And so since over time, we've been able to build and leverage both our summer program as well as our academic year program. So what does the Michigan Community College Summer Research Fellowship Program entail? It's the only one in University of Michigan, and basically it's statewide. So we serve all the community colleges in the state. Any student attending a community college in the state of Michigan can apply. So right now, the application, by the way, closes today. This point received 320 applications. And part of that is uploading the students' transcripts, etc., but also writing a personal statement and those things. I'm fully aware as the director, knowing that community colleges are not all equitable, may not have good writing centers, and many of the students do not know or know how to write in a personal statement effectively, or it could scare them. And so we have community college peer facilitators who are now in UROP, who came to University of Michigan, transferred successfully, planted in the community colleges, working with students on their writing their proposal and giving them feedback. We also have online tutorials and giving them. We also work with the faculty at the community college, the TRIO centers, etc., in terms of writing and giving students feedback. But when students apply, we are able to admit about 60, 65, so it's competitive. But we also want to make sure that it's extremely diverse, that it's representative of the state of Michigan, the community college, but also diverse in the field of research interests. So it's just not STEM. It's creative arts, humanities, social sciences, etc. Students come on campus 10 weeks, they can, option. So it's a 10-week full-time research stipend. They receive $5,000. The community college student has the option if they want. If they want to live close on campus on Ann Arbor, they can. But we provide an additional $1,000 for those students who do want to live on campus. Those, it doesn't make sense, as you know. With community college students, it's parking, it's other issues. They have dependents at home. They have other obligations. So we provide those students with the option of driving in, and we give them a parking pass during the 10-week period, so they don't have to worry about parking. We also work with institutional services on child care, et cetera, because we also have parents who are coming in and need child care. And so the point is, over the 4-week period, every student is able to work on a research project of their choice. And we align it, we try to align it as best we can based on the community college curriculum. An example is if a student is working on a research and they're wanting to come to U of M and they already have an interest, we'll work with that faculty member at the community college to identify similar research going on at University of Michigan so they can continue and advance. That's not a requirement, though. So again, it's an option. They also, when they come to campus, are treated like a full-time U of M student. They have a U of M ID. They have access to all the resources one can imagine. They have full access to the library resources. They also receive all the professional training. We provide weekly training on being able to carry out research. So what does that mean? Any of you do research or familiar with research? So every department method and whatnot is different. And so you want to set it up whereby a student is successful. So when we have faculty submit projects, on the application when faculty submit projects, they are asked, what are the skills that a student needs to learn to be successful? It may be R programming, it may be stats, it may be SPSS, it may be EndNote, whatever it may be. We're like, sure. So what our office does is hire the instructors within the University of Michigan who have that skill set. So imagine every week, community college students, as part of their research, they're attending these professional workshops, learning these skills, and being able for a 10-week period, having access to all this. And then also, they are paired up with a U of M community college transfer student who also participated during the summer, CCSFP. So we intentionally make sure that we're setting up the student with the resources that they need, the peer mentorship that they need, but also access to faculty, which is key. And where transfer students and where any student spends the most time is in a classroom and or interactions with faculty. And be able to understand the nuances of instructors and faculty at a community college versus at a R1 institution, which is very different, and I'll address that later. So these are some of the other activities we include. They all present during the summer research symposium, et cetera, et cetera. We invite the community college partners, everyone, they are judges, et cetera, during that. During the academic year, we have our Changing Gears. Again, this is for admitted students who came from the community college. So we also provide an opportunity that once a community college student is admitted to U of M and they're participating in UROP, that they get to broaden their network, that they still get to continue with research and or look at other areas of research that they want to explore. They get the peer mentorship and training that was previously discussed. So we just don't do work during the summer. We also provide the opportunity during the academic year. So next, what I want to introduce you and reintroduce you to is Devon in terms of how some of the departments at U of M have adopted some of the things that UROP has done, but also have sort of took their own assessment of what they need to do in their departments to address transfer student success.
Thank you. So as I said, my name is Devon Keene. I work at the School of Information. We think of University of Michigan as a really huge school, which it is. We have 29,820 undergraduates, and that was fall 17, so who knows, the number is probably much more. But at the School of Information, we're one of the smaller schools and colleges at the University of Michigan, and we are one of the increasing number of professional schools who are creating undergraduate programs. So our undergraduate program has been around for going into our 6th year, and we really did it in phases. So the first, we are primarily, we were first cross-campus transfers. So we say all of our students are transfer students. And then we also have preferred admission for those who are freshmen applying and decide that they want to apply to the School of Information in their sophomore year. And then in the 4th year, we went and decided we wanted to start accepting applications from external transfer applicants. So those, we call them also new transfer applicants. So that started 2 years ago, was when we first started accepting applications from outside of the University of Michigan. We have 326 undergraduate students this year. So I'm going to start this and frame this discussion about our Community College Summer Institute with highlighting the voices of some of our community college students who took part in this institute. This is after 3 days of intensive workshops and connections with faculty and staff at the School of Information. These are some of the feedback we received. U of M is affordable and within my grasp. Despite previous setbacks, a place at U of M is still a possibility. It is important to reflect after failures and successes. And lastly, someone said, it's okay to step out of your comfort zone. Sometimes it works out well. This is after 3 days. Now, what many of you may not realize is that something students face often something I call the M-timidation. Right? We see that block M, and it stands for prestige, and people know it's like a premier institution, but there are also students have a lot of M-timidation. They see that block M and they think, not me, it's not possible, it's too expensive, there's no way. And really, many of them have never even heard of something called the field of information science. What is that, right? Parents do not go around and advisors don't say, you should be a user experience researcher or designer. You should be an information analysis. You should be a project manager. They're usually saying doctor, lawyer, nurse, social worker, right? Those are all great fields, but the School of Information knows right now for our undergrad program, we have a 100% employment rate after graduation, average salary of $69,000. Why should that only be available to folks who just happen to be in the know? And so we really wanted to create an opportunity for students to come and sort of really create a low barrier of entry, for them to come and find out more about what this field of information was. If you don't know what something is, you're not going to just look for it or sign up for it. And so really just following up on what Michelle was talking about, we saw the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Initiative as a way to really forefront some of this work and some of these plans that we had. And so our school, long before I came into this role, applied to our provost for funding. And the budget line request probably said something like, we would like to request some DEI funds for work with external transfer students and for a staff position and some initiatives, right? Then my position was born and I was hired 3 years ago. And with that, we had a focus on community college students because we are a 2-year upper level program. So students can do 2 years at the community college and then come over to the University of Michigan School of Information and complete 2 more years to complete their bachelor's degree. We are a STEM degree. And when we did that, it was really key to make some really key decisions. So here's our brochure. 3 days, free fun. All of it's free. Some of the things that stand out about these 3 days is that we provide a stipend for participants. So lots of times what happens, there's a fee for some program. I mean, UROP is free, and this is where the collaboration came into. I should back up a little bit and say, I came into the position in February. The first institute was in May. So my position didn't exist. The name of it didn't exist. It was like, hi, Devon, create something for community college students that involves maybe a residential component and community college. Go. You know, how do you create something like this in 3 months? How do you even decide how long the program should be? I worked formerly at the African Studies Center at the International Institute, and what you see a lot in development work and people working in African studies, or people come to me and say, I'm going to go to Ghana, I'm going to start this program, I'm going to do all these things, and I would say, have you ever been there? Do you have a partner on the ground? Do they even know what you want? Is that even what they want? So at my core orientation, it says, you don't create anything without consulting with the community. But I had 3 months, right? So how do I do this? And how I do it is with our partners. Is looking to see who on campus is already doing this work, who's working with the same communities. I was not interested in reinventing the wheel. And so as you can see, I consulted with our Center for Educational Outreach. If you're not going to be 10 weeks in intensive, 3 days is something that people might be able to do. They can leave work. And that's why we did a stipend. We know that even if we pay for every single component of the program, there's still gas money. And is it a pay week? There's still all these different things that might prevent someone from going, and we want to remove all of those barriers. The key of what we did here is where institutional goals meet student needs, is we didn't want outreach to be apart from admissions. Lots of times, right, we bring people to campus and we say, oh, that's great, here's all the bells and whistles, something shiny, go on your way, and then they apply, and there's no connection to those same people. So in our school, we really wanted to make sure that our outreach was connected to our missions, that we make sure our missions continued to be holistic and took into account some of the characteristics, again, of merit that Michelle was talking about. For example, maybe they weren't able to be very active on campus, right? But because they worked full time. So we talk about how can we put that into their essays. How do we acknowledge the skills that they gained during the time that they worked? And the Institute themselves, as you saw, we did resume workshops with them. One of the essays they applied to get into the program was also one of the essays they used for applying to CCSI, is one of the essays you use to apply actually to the School of Information. So when they left the Institute, whether they decided to apply or not, they were going to leave with some concrete skills. Our Career Development Office did again, resume building workshops with them, strength finders workshops, so they knew what their strengths were. They can use that in an interview. They can use that in an essay for college admissions. And our goal was not to be competitive with our colleagues, but collaborative. So at the end of our Community College Summer Institute, we even host a transfer fair. Like, hey, if nothing we said or we did struck a chord with you, then you can also talk to one of our colleagues and try to make that really easy for them. And part of it too was workshops from our faculty. So our faculty lead workshops taken right from the classroom, actually not even workshop, lectures and interactive sessions that are pulled right from the classroom. So after the first CCSI, one of the participants said to me, so this is really interactive and great. Like, did you do this just for us? Did you create these lectures just for us? And I said, no. I wish we'd had time, right? 3 months. You ask a faculty member, you can't be asking them to create something all new. And so they were actually engaging in activities that were straight from our classrooms, in some cases even from our graduate program classrooms, where I had faculty in our user experience design actually pull something from their grad school. So all of it is connected. So you incorporate with admissions, connect students with faculty. We have a stipend, professional development. We provide transportation for folks if they needed a way to get here. We actually paid for bus tickets for people to travel down from Lansing because they didn't have a way to get here. So again, removing all barriers to entry. And then my position, the last thing I'm going to really describe, is that my position was not just to create this institute, right? It was from awareness, outreach, all the way through exploration, application, admission, matriculation, and then when they're here as a student. So my face is a face that you see all throughout that process. And as we're living into the work, that's really daunting, right? It's a lot of work. So we're trying to figure out, how do you make this work? And I have a lot of colleagues that are alongside me, and I also have folks that, Michelle, that I continue to connect with conferences like this to figure out, how do we make this a lived experience? How do we continue to work with students' voices and be co-creative and collaborative in this? So every step of the way, we're talking to students, we're surveying students, and we have a program that I designed once they came into the School of Information called iSuccess, where I continue to meet one-on-one with students, again, to say, what's your lived experience? How can I support you in this work? What can we do structurally to guarantee your success? And how do we see where we've got it wrong and where we need to make adjustments? Perfectly aligned with our speaker yesterday who talked about the student-ready college. So all of this is, again, the basis is co-collaborative, co-creative, minimizing barriers to entry. I call myself an educational access crusader, along with all of my colleagues. This is the work that we do, is what we're here for, and we're just trying to be responsive and flexible in what we're doing and how we're building our programs. And the Community College Summer Institute is just part of it, but wouldn't have been possible with the school's DEI initiatives overall, the universities, and also with the work that UROP has done.
So before we talk about institutional agents and some other things in your folder, funds of knowledge, etc., there's some definitions that we first need to establish. And those of you who aren't familiar with the higher ed terrain, both Dr. Tia yesterday was scraping at this yesterday, same with Alfred Herrera on Wednesday. But really what it's called in literature is institutional agents. And in a moment, we're going to put you through a discussion activity and bring it back of how institutional agents actually can operationalize students' funds of knowledge. So institutional agents, it started with Ben Simon and Stanton Salazar, individuals who occupy high-status positions within their institution or organization and who know how to access high-value resources, navigate complex systems, and take effective action, have the potential to be institutional agents. So basically, they possess human, cultural, and social capital. And each one of us are in positions to be institutional agents. It is only, though, when these individuals use their capital to transmit high-value resources, opportunity, privileges, and services to underserved students that they become institutional agents. Because every institutional agent possesses different resources, the actions they take to use those resources on behalf of their students. Potential agents might not be aware of how they can use their resources to aid students if they occupy a position not normally associated with direct student support. So with that, in your folders, I want to give a little caveat. I also teach and whatnot and came from USC, a lot of my doctorate work and other scholarly work. But they actually have, out of their Center for Urban Education at USC, University of Southern California, an actual institutional agent working with faculty, working with institutions at the community college in terms of what does this look like. They hold 3-day institutes. So what I want you to do is take the time, there's an actual vignette in there, Armando Gomez, and maybe take a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, to read it. But at the same time, on the side is an institutional checklist you will find. Does everyone have that? So as you read, make notes in terms of where Armando is operationalizing, again, operationalizing his institutional agency, his agency. So from that case study, and like I said, there's many, many cases, and we all are in these positions. I'm sure all of us know similar stories and experiences in what we do in our work. What specific knowledge does Armando have about Latinx students in STEM fields from that vignette? What knowledge does he have? Yes? Correct. What other knowledge does he have? Yes? Absolutely. Other knowledge. One more. Yes. Yes, yes. So keep that in mind. What institutional connections and resources does Armando draw upon to increase his support of Latinx STEM students at his institution? Institutional connections and resources. It's going back to he's utilizing his agency here. What was it? His faculty? What else? Mm-hmm. He's using his position as a dean at a R1 institution, wherever he's at, to make that phone call. What else? Faculty. In what ways does Armando, and you were touching on this back here, move beyond the role of a bridge agent into an institutional broker for Latinx STEM students? And what is that? What's he doing there? Other observations from that.
He's also moving the conversation where he wants it to go and not let them talk about all bad stuff.
Exactly.
What's not working or how
So I took some notes and wrote down some notes. So he's utilizing his bridging agent as a bridge between individuals and key institutional agents between the institutions who are often gatekeepers in education. And we all know on our campuses those gatekeepers. And we all know that this is a real issue. And we also know that the transition process in itself can be gatekeeping. So a bridging agent must have well-developed social connections and knowledge about how these resources will benefit individuals, particularly students, right? But then an institutional broker is an extension of a bridging agent when he or she takes an active role in negotiating those agreements between key players and accessing resources on behalf of students and their educational needs, just like what you said back there. So he utilized and leveraged his position, his positionality with that. And we each have the ability to operationalize where we stand and do this in different ways and in different capacities. So taking that then, so we're all institutional agents, right? We're all positioned and empowered to work with students through the transfer process, whether you're admissions, whether you're orientation, whether you're academic advising, whether you're faculty, whether you're undergraduate research, wherever you are positioned at. The funds of knowledge, community cultural wealth, again, they've been talking about this throughout the conference, but no one has actually shown you what that is. And in your folder is actually, I condensed YOSO's 2005 Community Cultural Wealth Funds of Knowledge. All of our students have capital, especially our diverse students, our underrepresented student populations, etc. Transfer students have capital. And so we need to change that narrative in terms of merit. In terms, as R1 institutions, we need to change that. Hopefully there's some admissions folks in here. But part of DEI is to change, and let me tell you, it's a struggle, as you all know, because it's change in leadership, change in behavior, having deans, having our president's office be in Armando and championing that and making that case. But the case needs to be made and the change needs to happen. But it's taking those 6 dynamics of what community cultural wealth is, that these students have assets. We each have a story. We each have a narrative. Community college, you may be a single mom. You may have worked in the field, worked in professional field for, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You may have been in the military, in the vet, and are now a vet. You may have, there's reasons, and we need to recognize that. And so at University of Michigan, we've, at least with UROP, we do recognize that. Again, the key word is opportunity. And so someone had mentioned, actually I want to go back to this a little bit because sometimes people present a model to you and don't really discuss it. So looking at aspirational capital, again, does everyone have the handout? Underneath the aspirational capital there's questions that I added in terms of helping one change that narrative and changing that mind frame. So Dr. Tia yesterday and others have spoken about, oftentimes we talk about, deficits. No. This model is strength-based. And so you have to change the questions you are asking for it to be strength-based. So aspirational capital, these students have aspirations. And oftentimes what happens is institutions create these barriers for them through policies, through structures that alienate and exclude student populations. And so I think, the School of Information is a great example of a department saying, we need to break down these walls, one. We need to look at our admissions. We also need to broaden our view of what the students bring. Familial capital. A lot of our students, collectively, transfer students, they have families of their own. And we need to bring that into the curriculum and co-curriculum, that knowledge base of what they have. And I'll give you an example of that. Navigational capital, how to navigate systems, right? You're coming from a community college or set of community colleges. And then you arrive at the front door of U of M or other institution or whatnot. And it's like a mini city with a different language, a different code that the students are not used to. We're used to it on our end, and institutions fail students when we use our code and expect that student to understand the same code, the same language. And so it really requires being intentional in terms of transitioning and helping our transfer students in that. Because again, it's a very different language and code and mode of operation of how we operate. Familial capital, social capital, etc. So someone had mentioned faculty and whatnot, and I want to circle back to this. Yeah. Sure. So resistance capital is getting a little bit at critical race theory. There are structures and systems that have alienated folks, specifically historically underrepresented groups throughout. And so there our own histories, history of African American, history of Latinx, history of our brothers and sisters who are Native American, American Indian. There is all a shared history of some form of resistance. It's embedded. It's embedded in our families, embedded in our history. And oftentimes that comes up in terms of our positionality in society and other things. And so resistance capital is acknowledging that and also at the same time allowing students to see their learning as a frame to be informed and to do work related to social justice and also inform others about social justice issues in education. Yeah. So, okay. So really, you also sort of framed it, and she's a sociologist and political science. She framed it in that way. And it's really rooted, again, in communities of color. You know, when they reach institutions, there's a piece, again, not just social justice. There's even family, familia and all that. And so when you combine these factors, oftentimes students are still connected to their communities. They still want to give back. They see injustices every single day. They lived injustices. And that tends to serve as a motivational and or aspirational at times. So there's a lot of intersectionality of these terms. And oftentimes when students arrive to campus, they're seeking those opportunities where oftentimes there's a disconnect between they're sitting in the classroom and what they're learning versus what they've experienced in their life or what got them there. I always use myself as an example. I was an undergraduate engineering student, first one in the family to go to college, first woman amongst many Latinx, Afro-Latina. And let me tell you, not once does engineering, until this day, it's rare you find them to talk about those topics. Yet those topics as engineers and what you're doing in society and addressing structure and building systems and all that, you are definitely impacting society. So why are you not including those issues into the curriculum, in co-curriculum, period? And so what I'm saying there is that it's that students bring their history, who they are, to the table, and acknowledging that and giving them the space to utilize their education to address inequity, to address concerns, to address that. No. Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Oh, yeah.
Also in terms of admissions, right? We think about the deficit model. Oh, they don't have this, they don't have that, right? If you're looking for these strengths, if you're looking through this lens and this model, you'll recognize, oh, it looks like they're very active in this group or that group. Oh, they have this strength. They're going to bring that as a benefit to our community as they come in, right? So these are things that are not traditionally taken into account. We're just looking at GPA, we're looking at, were they president of this club? Did they create that club? Well, there's merit. So for broadening definition of merit, like Michelle's saying, then we're going to look at this capital, like, oh gosh, they're very invested. Maybe they care for an ailing parent. They've worked, at this during this time. They have this history in their communities. Then these are all areas of strength-based view. So it's really a way to communicate to students that these are strengths, that you see, that recognize these strengths of them. Validation as you're meeting with students too. Gosh, I see that you're really engaging your community. I really see that you're passionate about these ideas. That brings sense of strength to our community. Thank you so much for choosing to come to University of Michigan. We benefit so much from you. So it's changing the frame and additional areas of validation.
Thank you. The other, interesting thing too is that, from my vantage point, when I see students, they have no idea of what research is, and and rightfully so. In their head, they see lab coats, they see this, they see that. Oh my gosh, research is so diverse, but it's also inclusive and also can have an impact on one. And so when we evaluate the application, sort of what Devon was getting at, when I work with a community college, it's a collective process. It's not me sitting in an office and our staff evaluating the applications or our admissions team doing that. And I want to be crystal clear. Our summer community college fellowship, if it gets the students into U of M door and it leverages, awesome. But I want it to make sure that it's leveraging them forward and propelling them for whatever opportunity is next for them. And so sometimes that could conflict with admissions people in U of M because they're like, oh no, we want them here. And here's me there's those who it will propel them in here. But at the same time, it's also going to propel the student to leverage them even further into perhaps another institution and or career. So I want to delve and break this into sort of how we operationalize the role of institutional agents between the two. As you know, so at R1 institution, community college, I've worked at both. I've worked in the state of Washington, California, with the largest community college system in the nation, and Michigan. As you know, faculty are probably the ones with, especially at an R1 institution, have the most power, period. They are top of the line in terms of institutional agency. They also can be big gatekeepers and barriers to students, as we know and experience. What? I'm with you. I know this. We're quite aware of that. And so, if you can create an opportunity, something like UROP that's been around for 30 years, we know who those mentors are. We know if they had a good experience. We know if they're good. And we also know the problematic ones. So we will never pair a community college student, even if a mentor's like, I want to, no. It's our job on our end to communicate that, my job to communicate that with the mentor in a very nice and cordial way, but we don't allow that because we don't want that for the student. When our faculty submit projects with us, there's a number of questions we ask them. I talked about the whole professional skill building stuff, but the other thing we ask them is, did they start off at a community college? So we actually have 30 years of data of our faculty who started off at community college who are now University of Michigan faculty at a research institution. And let me tell you, that's not required, but those faculty step up to the plate because they've been there and they always give recognition to where they started. And that is important. As well as remember, we're an R1 institution. We also have graduate and postdoc students who also came from community college students. And we use them as institutional agents because they too have projects and so. So here's a wonderful opportunity to get access to the number one gatekeeper at an R1 institution, and that's faculty. I'll answer your question. Oh, I can address you really quick. As a student, they went through the community college system. They transferred to a 4-year institution somewhere in the nation or not in the nation. And then they did their doctorate somewhere and are now full-fledged faculty. And so it's really important. The second piece is absolutely important. Every department, every major has its own culture, norms, language, and values. Every single one of them. If you're in the STEM field or in a STEM related, there are many messages, subliminal or not, that tell you you are welcomed or you are not welcomed. And you know that, trust me, as a woman of color, you know what that is. You feel it all the way down. You experience it in your interactions, etc. You definitely see it in the curriculum. Social science and humanities are also different. So, what a wonderful way to acclimate a community college student, not just a faculty, but to the culture and norms and values, you know, and I'll talk about our curriculum in a minute. It's also helping them negotiate. We're negotiating that gatekeeping. We're setting it up. We're intentionally setting it up for them. During the summer, those students have access to financial aid advisors. They meet weekly with financial aid advisors to evaluate where they're at in their financial, because as you know, students run out of funding. The lovely 2 + 2 sometimes is 2 + 3, 2 + 4, and those students can't complete their degree. So the more informed they are of where they're at in the federal system aid process and how much aid they have left is key. The other thing is academic advising. They're able to sit down one-on-one with an academic advising throughout those 10 weeks to see where their courses, through articulation, wherever that student wants to go, or even if they do want to go to a four-year institution. We also, I mentioned, aligned research opportunities with community college curriculum. Again, we're not an honors program. We opened it up. But some of the community college will have an honors program, a directed studies, where the student has been doing something and we'll align it for them. Again, but it also embraces students' funds of knowledge, and this is what I want to get at. Students' funds of knowledge, how it takes place in research is by the nature of research, research isn't isolated, it's interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And we can give thousands of examples throughout this world and nation that if you didn't include inclusiveness and diversity in research, we wouldn't have half the stuff we had today, or wouldn't be working. So our curriculum is framed around inclusive research. We also train our faculty on building that. So we work with our Center on Research, Learning, and Teaching to be inclusive in their pedagogy and their research approaches. We also, the faculty are able to interview the student. We want to make sure it's a good fit, and the student gets to interview the faculty to make sure it's a good fit. And I can assure you, our faculty have always said the community, they actually keep them after the summer. They keep them, and out of those students, many of those students actually go back to their home institution and continue with the research from afar. Some of them have already been published before they even get into a four-year institution. Number-wise, we have an 89% acceptance rate to U of M. And we're talking about students who perhaps maybe had a 3.2, but now they have a letter of recommendation from a University of Michigan faculty who can talk about their research. And if you're a researcher, that is your baby. And so to say that you shared that, you trained them and all that, and give them that extra sort of lift, propels them into the door. And so again, it's changing the narrative of what merit is and being able to give students those experiences. And of course, lastly, we have ongoing peer facilitators. These are all students who transferred themselves, who came from the statewide community college system. They meet with them weekly. They orient them. They also do a lot of, and go back to the community colleges. And we're so successful at this point that our students, there's already talk in the community colleges of, oh, you're going to apply to the community college summer research and all that. We also work a lot with the presidents at the community college and the dean's office and the faculty. So, and programs such as TRIO, such as MESA, et cetera, to make sure that, again, that if there are institutional gatekeepers at that other institution that we're not aware of, that we're somehow going outside and reaching in some capacity. So does that take a lot of work? Yes. We have staff who actually research each of the community colleges, what services, what programs, who's what, and we continually build that database to contact them and work with them. And lastly, what we're doing is doing a longitudinal study of our program. So as you know, yeah, we have funding, but we also don't take advantage of our funding. We know that we are responsible for assessing the impact of our program. So we're doing a longitudinal assessment of studying students from the point of, from coming from community colleges, what support services do they use at the community college, et cetera, to then make it to U of M, to then even into their careers. So it's a mixed method study that we're doing and really evaluating, because how do we know what we're doing is successful. We could do post-evaluations and whatnot, but how do we know the long-term impact? We did the long-term impact of all of our students, but we've never done the long-term impact of really looking at our community college students and what they bring to our institution. So we have a time for a few questions or discussion. Mike? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I forgot something really important to mention, and Michelle really brought it to mind. One key way that our dean acted as an institutional agent and our faculty leadership is we decided to accept all college-level credits. So I don't know if I mentioned that previously. So they adopted this equity lens, because for our cross-campus transfer, we accept all of their credits from other units on campus with a grade of C- or above. And so when we started accepting applicants from outside of the University of Michigan, our dean and faculty leadership decided we were going to treat our students the same. And so those coming from outside our community colleges or even a four-year institution, that we would also accept all college-level credits, so 100 level and above, with a grade of C- or above, up to the university maximum of 60 credits. And so this is something that students just really could not, I see mouths open, could not believe it. And we tell them, hey, if you decide to transfer out of our school, that's not true for other schools and colleges. So do check those transfer credit equivalency databases, but know that that's how we see that. People say, oh, you lowering your standards? We're not lowering our standards. We're adopting an equity lens. We're not going to have a two-tier system where cross-campus transfers are judged by one way, transfer credit, and our external transfer students, no matter where they come from, are judged otherwise. So this is ways in which our faculty and dean act as an institutional agent and then allow us, just clear the pathway for us as student support, academic affairs, admissions, recruitment, to do our work, to really clear the way. But these are some fundamental policy issues that really enable us to go forth, and again, another really huge way that we're minimizing those barriers. So it all is connected, so each level, wherever we're at, we do what we can to clear those pathways. And we continue to look to Europe. We're a long way from a longitudinal study, but when we're ready to do that, we know we'll turn to Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. Any questions? Yes.
What's your proportion of campus students in your program and versus transfer until,
Yep.
you said it's only been a couple years, so.
Yep, so we have 326 undergrads this year. Of those, about 32 are transfer students. We had 14 in the first cohort, 22 in the second cohort, and our first group will be graduating this spring. So really excited to have them as alumni and being able to come back, and they're very committed to connecting back with students. Yeah. Yes. So the question was how we found out. Yeah.
So Europe, again, we've been around for 30 years. So we have a very robust data management system. And so every single year, so remember, you have to keep in mind, we have a full-fledged academic year program that serves over 1,400 students. We also have 8 summer fellowships. This is one of them, just strictly for community college. So every time our faculty are submitting, and it's extensive work, we have a serious faculty recruitment that takes place for months and months. And we go to the departments, et cetera. But when faculty enter the application, they actually have to submit a research proposal. We want to make sure that indeed, faculty, we want to make sure indeed it is research. It's not someone doing coffee or something. No, we evaluate what they're submitting, the skills, but then also from a data point of view, we wanted to ask these key questions. And so one of the key questions is, did you start off at a community college? And we have that data point now, and able to run that list and reach out specifically. We reach out to all of our faculty, but for the summer fellowship, we reach back out to them. And yeah, they're just absolutely sign me up. Like they've never lost that sense of what the community college did for them. If at any point you want to see our system or kind of what projects look like, we'd be more than happy. We work with across the nation with institutions on this. So. Great. Thank you.